intermediate industrial companies that don't have in-house water management professionals. And so we're a hydrogeology company, and I think that there 4.5 years ago, there was a definite niche opportunity for us. And and so our 4 core service offerings. So we're a hydrogeology company. We do water supply well drilling and installation supervision on site. Our second big main service line is aquifer testing and specialized equipment rentals. So a lot of people want to own this stuff. It's very, very niche, like pressure gauges, flow meters. And then third is we assist the regulatory side. So Water Act licensing in Alberta and reporting. And then fourth is our corporate water management and prospect generation. So we do some high impact groundwater sourcing projects in Alberta and Texas, which we can chat about. Last year, I opened a branch office in San Antonio, Texas. So that's definite growth for the company.
Very cool. So most of the clientele would be from the energy industry, I guess?
Absolutely. First 2 years of business, we were like over 90% focused. So hydraulic fracturing sourcing, so drilling groundwater supply wells, testing water wells for fracs and enhanced oil recovery or water floods. And that is changing rapidly every day. I mean, diversification, I think, is the name. Like I'd say that's the theme for me this year. We're looking at not just oil and gas companies, but mining, large, agricultural users, municipalities in Alberta, rural municipalities in Texas. They all need groundwater. So our equipment, we can pivot and utilize it in Alberta and Texas in those industries. So that's my every day. That's what I'm working on.
Very cool. And things are going pretty well. It sounds like you did $500,000 in revenue last year. Business is good.
We're small, right? I mean, we keep just myself and another contractor right now. So if you keep the overhead low, I mean, you don't need a ton of revenue to make a living. And that's really, I mean, like I said, we're focused on assisting, for short-term projects. We're here for a good time, not a long time. And that's kind of the way I think with the gig economy, that's where things are going, right?
Right.
So we help them out. And we also have ongoing monthly regulatory things, but there definitely is a dichotomy between, Texas, which I would say is a deregulated water industry from a regulatory point of view, and then Alberta, which is like the reason this company exists on the groundwater side is you need professional hydrogeologists like myself to stamp a report for anything over a domestic usage volume, which is 3,650 cubes of water, which isn't a lot on an annual basis. So if you need it for anything, like I said, oil and gas, mining, agricultural users that use a decent amount of groundwater, they need a stamp. So I've realized that regulations create jobs.
It's bittersweet, I would imagine.
And where there isn't regulation, they don't really need those jobs. So
right.
That's what I've been wrestling with. It's geology is and hydrogeology, what we do, groundwater services, is tough to sell. Pretty easy to sell when I just show a piece of paper to our clients and say, this, you guys need to do this, and they go, okay, all right, fine, we'll do it. Versus selling something that someone doesn't need to do, or there's no government body barking up their chain to do it. Right.
How'd you get into hydrology? I read that you took it in university and studied all that sort of stuff.
So I always get this question. So hydrogeology is what we do. So that's subsurface, that's groundwater below subsurface. Hydrology is surface water, so rivers, lakes. And so my background, I'll give you a bit of update on that, is I'm born and raised Calgarian, and I went to school at University of Calgary. Just did a basic science degree, just math and chemistry. Took 5 years to do it. Partied a fair bit. Took my time.
Those are the good days, yeah.
Yeah, those were the good days. And then worked for a decent sized engineering consulting company called Golder Associates here, and I was in Edmonton.
Okay.
For 2 years, and then in Calgary. And I got so I did environmental and hydrogeology, and basically I was doing a lot of mostly field work, and I realized that I needed to get some higher education and specialize, really focus. And I was really passionate about, water wells and groundwater sourcing. And so I went back to school at the University of Waterloo, and did Earth Science Masters in 2 years over there. And then after graduating, I was there with my fiance at the time. Came back, wanted to come back to Calgary, and the economy was booming at that time. Got a job with a small mom and pop hydrogeology company. And then with the downturn in 2016, I wanted to keep working, right? So I got
laid off too.
Yeah. Everybody. I think everybody did.
Yeah.
And so I was fortunate. My wife and I just put some money together to buy one set of equipment. You know what I mean? Like one electric water level tape, one transducer. All just the basics things that I need to do. And bought a truck and started it out of my garage and started doing the same thing on a consulting basis. And I guess the rest is history. But I mean, the one thing I could say about my master's program was that, I mean, not only was it technically I learned a lot, but every person in Waterloo, like Ontario and Alberta, there's a different vibe. And everybody in Waterloo, most people I talked to, everyone had a side hustle. Most people own their own business. And I kind of realized, like in a down economy, the economy wasn't that hot there at the time, that you need to create your own opportunity. And Calgary's a very entrepreneurial city, but I mean, that's one of the things I took away from that. I mean, with the BlackBerry, there was the whole RIM and BlackBerry vibe going on at Waterloo, and everybody was into their own, just making their own stuff, and super creative. I would say a very creative place. And I try and bring some of that back here too.
That's really cool. I mean, I experienced the same thing with Rose Bros Coffee. Actually, it was all originally just a fun little hobby, and then oil industry took a turn for the worst, and you're like, okay, well, I guess this will be my main thing now, and it's actually been fortunate, kind of lucky to have it.
Absolutely, right. And you get a little bit of people say you get flexibility in your own boss, but I mean, everybody's somebody's boss. Like
Totally.
My wife is my boss, and shout out to my wife Kendra.
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, everybody, and also your clients run.
Yeah.
They dictate everything, right? How they want things done, and that's what we're here for. So,
when you started Connate, was it a big risk? Did you have to go on a limb? A lot of debt?
Yeah, no. So luckily the barrier to entry for consulting companies, and I'd say that's probably one of the things that's tough about them, is there isn't a huge barrier to entry other than being licensed, having the proper education, and then going out. And so I was fortunate, my wife and I, Kendra, she helped me out, and we kind of pulled some money together. It wasn't a lot.
Wasn't too much.
Just proof of concept, right? The first year was just, can you keep the lights on? And I mean, overhead was very, very low, and we're still very lean, right? Like we just here in our office in Calgary, just 2 offices, all the equipment's here. And then same in San Antonio, it's a desk with storage locker. We have about 25% of our equipment in San Antonio on the north end of town there, and very lean. Like there's no room for fancy suits and jackets and all the whatever, right? Like it's very basic.
So as a hydrologist, I don't know many hydrologists. I would have thought that you would have had kind of your pick of the litter for jobs, but I guess when the energy industry, kind of collapsed in Canada, it kind of brought, the jobs didn't really last for hydrologists either, it sounds like. Yeah,
so hydrogeologists, so subsurface, that's what we do. So drill and source wells and groundwater sourcing.
Yeah.
So hydrogeology, it is a very niche, you're right, like it is a very niche market. So there's not a lot of, we have competition, but I mean, it's great when there's a ton of this type of work, right? When things were booming in the oil and gas industry and other industries in Alberta. But right now, to be honest, in Alberta, we're competing against, I would say there's a surplus of talent, right?
It dries up, right? Yeah.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, and when there's not enough work, your pricing power and pricing just collapses, right? And that's what I'd say. The service companies, that's what's happening, especially oil and gas service companies in Alberta. I mean, it truly is a race to the bottom. And when you think you're at the bottom, you still see guys going to crazy places, right, with regards to pricing. And that's where I think the U.S. Is really interesting, because especially the southern U.S., Texas, New Mexico, even California, is interesting because there's a lot of work, and that's not the only part of the discussion is pricing. It's actually like, can you get this work done? Are you qualified? Blah blah blah. Like that's what they're important. It's not pricing. It's not just I can do it for this price, right? I'm looking for and we provide a quality service, and that's what, if we can't make money at it, then I don't really want to do it. I don't want to burn our equipment and myself out and everyone else just for nothing. So
when you opened up your latest office in Texas, how did that come about?
So it came out just of going to conferences. I would go to I liked a lot of the US conferences. So I went down to one, and it was it was booming in San Antonio, and then Houston area too. Visited there, and I was like, this is neat. And given the fact that it's a southern, US, they're arid area. Groundwater, water, there has to be a demand, like Arizona, all throughout there, and there is. So I was like, why? I started just digging into it more and more, and then I just, US dollars too. I was like, that sounds cool. Getting paid in US bucks versus Canadian. So, and that was the initial kind of thesis for it, was just, go to a market that has 10 times the population. Right. So bigger market, different industries, and definitely more diversified, right? Like Houston and Texas, like San Antonio. Houston's a very industrial city, but it's huge, and there's so much going on. It's not, everybody thinks it's just an oil and gas hub, but there's a ton of things going on there. And Texas on its own is just a massive economy, right?
So if you were to break up your business now, what proportion falls into energy and agriculture and other industries? Is it roughly distributed?
So this has been something that's been, where I'd say the end of 2019, I really started getting, so we're still very focused on oil and gas, but I would think by the end of this year we'll be, we were 90% plus, 80, 90%. So I'd say I'm hoping that we're going to get to 60, half. And then that way we're not totally dependent on it. You know what I mean? Ideally, I'd like to get to a point where it's kind of the whipped cream and cherry on top, not like the whole sundae, which is what the whole business relies on at this point.
I see.
And it takes time. It just really does, right? You can't rush the monkey. You know what I mean? You'll get a better show if you take time. And that's what we're committed to doing, is that business development, it takes time down there.
So how has the experience been in Texas with the energy industry? Because it's slowed down a lot in Canada, but are things hanging in there in Texas? Are they worse or the same?
Yeah, I talk to guys every week, and so our model there is, it's direct to the oil and gas client. Like, it'll be tough for us. So we're actually, we're working underneath bigger consultants for the most part. But to be honest, like, I think there will be a healthy oil and gas industry in the US coming out of COVID-19 and coming out of this. I'm not so sure. I think Canada's in for a tough slog, right? Like, we're still in a curtailed market, and egress and issues, and guys I talk to down there get excited at $45 oil and $40-$45. They're saying Eagle Ford, different basins, Permian will get rolling again. And there will be drilling activity, right? And that's what our business, if there's no completions, there's no need to drill water wells and test water wells and get any licensing done. So that's why we've been hit pretty hard with the downturn. But I do think there's a definite potential for very sustainable business down in Texas and New Mexico area.
Interesting. And so did you always want to be a hydrologist and study that and start your own business? And was it always the plan?
Yeah, I'd say I'm very passionate about it. I love groundwater and any, like, it's truly, I love it. And there's nothing better than testing water wells. I know it's pretty nerdy and boring, but it's very exciting. I love it. And
did you?
Well, I guess, yeah.
Growing up, was that your career path, or how did that?
So growing up, my dad was a dentist in Calgary. So he's retired now. That was the family biz, but he owned his own business. And so I grew up with that, right? like my mom was the accountant for my dad's business, and that was so I got to at the dinner table, and we'd help out, right,
Yeah.
mowing grass and cleaning the office, and so I grew up with like what it's like to run a business. And yeah,
Right.
so for sure, I think it's also, I mean, that's how you creating things, right? You have I'm a pretty creative guy, and that's what I enjoy. So yeah, I always probably, I knew I wanted to own a business, just what and I picked a pretty wacky niche, groundwater market, but I love it. Yeah, I'm the luckiest guy. I'm very lucky to do what I love. And yeah, I'm excited about going to places where our services are in extreme demand, right?
Yeah.
And they need it. And that's versus areas where I'd say like Alberta right now, just with too much supply.
I saw an article, you sent it to me, but it was also in the Wall Street Journal on the ethics of water. That's a pretty hot topic these days. There's a new futures market opening up for water. What is that about, and how does that affect the price of water?
Yeah, so that's very interesting. It's like in Q4 2020, the NASDAQ is teaming up to offer, basically it's commodity futures trading of the actual water rights in certain basins in California. And so it'll trade like any other commodity, like, wheat, oil and gas, natural gas, any commodity, which is quite unique, right? To have water being traded. And you're right, the ethics of that, and the difference I would say that we can chat about is that, I mean, Alberta, Canada, we're such a regulated country. And then in the US, so in Canada, for instance, the Crown, in Alberta, the Crown owns water, right? So they grant, we do all the licensing and reporting, and then they grant access to use that water in a certain volume, and for different industries. Whereas in the US, especially Texas, California, you have groundwater rights. So mineral owners, groundwater right owners, and then surface owners, and they can be all the same. They can be all the same person, and you can create a ton of wealth, right? If this is located in the correct area, and there's demand for groundwater in large volumes of it, especially in places like California. And yeah, I got to experience that firsthand. My wife Kendra did her master's down in Los Angeles, and so you see just the overpopulation, and so many people down there, and then there's so many different industries like agriculture, wine, vineyards, that use huge amounts of water, and yeah, all kinds of different industries you wouldn't think of, like olives and all kinds of stuff. So I think that the whole commoditization of water will be it's a huge opportunity, and I think I don't see Canada, like I said, just the way we're structured right now with ownership. I mean, you can't sell water in Alberta right now. And I think that kind of needs to change. You can sell access to it. There's ways around of granting access through your property and selling it in small volumes, but not in large volumes like everything in the US, right? Big, everything's big. And so yeah, it'll be interesting. I think, and the units are different down in California, right? And US acre feet, we do cubes here. But yeah, I think last pricing, I think there is $371 per acre foot. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. And I think that'll just, I mean, it's like any commodity. I mean, that's what it's starting out at. Who knows what it's going to trade for in a couple of years from now.
So you don't think there's an ethical issue with water being traded as a commodity and the price potentially going super high or anything along those lines?
Well, I guess I think it's good that it is going to be, commoditized in some respects, because I think it's one of our most precious resources, right? For human life, for industry, for everything. And, I think people might start to value when it's like gasoline or power. I mean, everybody just turns on their tap and water comes out, right?
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of thought that goes into how that all comes to be.
It's really weird we're talking about this. I was on Twitter today, and I don't know if you remember Dr. Michael Burry, the guy from The Big Short.
Yes.
Did you see his tweet today? He had a tweet about the water futures and the future thing on the NASDAQ.
So today, I haven't seen,
Yes,
I haven't, I love,
coincidentally.
it's interesting. I loved the movie. The movie was very well done. Yeah, and I remember that movie's getting pretty old now, right?
Yeah,
Like how old? It's like, I don't know, 8 or 10 years old.
yeah, and
And
his next venture was all on water, clean water, and securing water rights and all that. And but his tweet was that he wasn't happy about it. He thought that clean water should be a public good, and that private water is a tax on people, more or less, and it should be left to the public. So that's why I ask what you think, because you're an expert on it, and his view is that it should be left to the public.
well, I guess it depends on what and that's kind of the divide between surface water, like in the Colorado River and the Hoover Dam through Nevada into California. I
Yeah.
mean, that Lake Mead's getting drawn down to record low levels, but on the groundwater side, for us, like we have to spend a lot of money on drilling source wells, test holes, understanding the hydrogeology. Like there's a lot. It's very similar to it's a smaller version, I would say, of the oil and gas industry. So I think people should be rewarded though, because we've done it. We've drilled test holes in Alberta. We're identifying some south of San Antonio, and I mean we're putting our money where our mouth is, right? Like spending the time drilling it. And so if you discover a new aquifer in an area, do I think you should be rewarded for that? And you're creating value, right? And so, yeah, I do think I'm not totally opposed. I think you're right. Clean water, clean access to potable drinking water, whether that's surface water, groundwater, that you can consume is a human right. Everyone should have that, and not everybody has that across the world.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start to get in for commercial purposes, I think you should be rewarded, and there should be a private market for it where it can trade at a set price per volume.
I guess his worry is that if it becomes privatized, then you might exclude people who can't afford it, or there's situations where it's not a basic human right. But I suppose you could monitor it and regulate it somewhat. I don't know.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Well, I would say they're the pioneers, and that's what's going to be. California is. So how will that? I mean, each state is very different too, and just like every province in Canada, we have different regulation, and so it'll be interesting to see how that is rolled out. Yeah, and I guess it's similar to. I hope though that there's not, things with regards to like the oil and gas market where you get, oil cratering to zero and very volatile, right? Like that are basically paper markets, right? Not and so that's something I hope that it's but I mean it's a similar topic of healthcare. I mean that's private, right? I mean I think that's the way the world is going.
I guess you need to incentivize people to find water, but the trick is making sure that it doesn't become too expensive for anybody or anyone can't get water, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess that goes to one of the laws or rules in Texas and California. It's groundwater law, and it's basically called the law of the biggest pump. And what happens is you have people drilling deeper and deeper supply wells and bigger pumps, installing bigger pumps, and it's called the rule of capture.
Yeah.
And basically you can affect your neighbor, right? By increasing the drawdown around your property and pumping these wells extremely hard, which are not sustainable for long periods of time. So you actually hinder your neighbor. But that is the law down in the U.S. So they just have a different outlook than Canadians, right? Like they're very pro business, and they're very astute people that just go, this is what I want. This is how I'm going to get it. And yeah, so I respect them for that. I mean, they're very just cost focused too, right? They understand the economics. And I think that's one thing that is Canada, we're kind of maybe falling behind on, is we're all about, is this, you're impeding industry and companies wanting to invest money in a country and to do projects, because at the end of the day, these projects create jobs.
Yeah.
And Yeah, it's a really delicate. That's a delicate topic. I mean, I don't have a perfect answer for you on the ethics of selling water, but no, it's interesting.
I just thought, as an expert, you know have a lot more info on it than I do. I just read that tweet coincidentally today, and
That's cool. Yeah, I'll look into that. I mean,
he's a hardcore capitalist. You know, he's a businessman, but at the same time, it's interesting that he would comment on the dangers of privatizing water. That's what I found interesting. You know.
you also have to watch some of these trader guys too, right? Like they
Right.
talk from one side of their mouth and then indirectly they're
That's right.
hard, right? Like really, I mean,
That's true.
I think that's one thing. You got to take everything
Yeah.
with a grain of salt, especially when you know that he's heavily invested in looking at locking up. At the end of the day, it's locking up from private freehold owners, right?
Yes.
So they would be they'd be tied to a property, and at the end of the day, it's speculation, right? Purchasing something at a low valuation and trying to flip it at a multiple. We do that here, like I said, with regards to some of our test hole mapping projects with areas like where if you have no data and very little understanding of the hydrogeology, like the bedrock topography and lithology of an area, it takes a lot of money. It's capital intensive to understand that. And so, yeah.
I think it's one family that owns all the water rights on the island of Maui. Have you ever heard that story, the Baldwin family or something?
No.
So the water prices are super high on Maui because the one family at one time, or maybe they still do, own all the water rights. So, I could see if you were a native there or had lived there your whole life, why that might really piss you off, But at the same time, I guess they would have spent the money to develop the infrastructure and find the water.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. I mean, yeah. No, that's actually my grandparents retired in Maui, so that's a pretty cool place. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, apparently the water rates are really high in Maui. I don't know.
Well, it's expensive. Hawaii's expensive all around, so that doesn't surprise me. Just add it on, right? Add it on to the cost of living.
So the regulation in the States for water is just a lot different than Canada. Texas is a lot less regulated than Canada?
Completely, right. So associated with these groundwater rights, like as long as the landowner, like there is basic regulations of the Railroad Commission, but there's not a requirement for like licensing and flow meters and for stamping reports and putting pressure transducers, which are, here's an example of like, this is the specialized equipment. These are pressure gauges that measure water levels, so head above gauge. And we install these in water wells all across Alberta and rent them out by the month. And but there's no requirements for that sort of stuff in Texas. And it's basically comes down to the landowners. Like, are they comfortable? I mean, I've heard stories of the groundwater rights can be worth more than the oil and gas, like the minerals, because when they're selling on a per barrel basis, like there's guys like a year ago in the Midland area that are getting checks for, $600,000 US a month, right? For pumping their source wells on their property and supplying a frac. So, I mean, when you're getting that kind of money and, you're very pro development, right? And I would say that's the difference. I think there's more incentive for people. You don't hear people villainizing oil and gas development, mining, or different industries as much as you do in Canada, because that people see, the concrete benefits of it, right? Because and also personally, you see very wealthy people can become very wealthy very quickly, right? Individuals versus something that's now government owned in Alberta, right? The government really, at the end of the day, is the only one benefiting in taxes, and that's a whole other beast.
I guess you have to balance the public good, which is the government owning the water and managing it, versus, again, private interests. But you're an expert. You think that it's probably better to lean a little bit towards private interests rather than total government?
I think somewhere smack in the middle is where a proper, fair, and equitable regulatory system would be. So in Canada, do I think, in Alberta specifically, do we need? Well, I'm everyone's self-serving, right? Like I love what I do and what I get. I love getting paid to do what hydrogeology. But Do I think it's overregulated at this point? After seeing what I see in Texas and New Mexico, I mean, yes, I do. I think we are. It's to the point where, again, my clients that will say, this is crazy. Like, it's not just water, right? I mean, there's air regulations, for like forestry, protection of animals, and the list goes on and on and on. Water is just one part of that, and so I think it disincentivizes companies to do projects, right? So somewhere in the middle, I think, between Texas and Alberta, and maybe I'm doing some more research to other states. Colorado sounds like a pretty interesting place as well from a regulatory standpoint. A lot more regulation than the southern U.S. like Texas, but very measured, right? Like, I think it should be it should be a measured approach, and protection of groundwater is extremely important. But also we need jobs, right?
Yeah. I mean, do you ever worry? I don't know anything about underground water reservoirs, but do you ever worry about running out of water? How does that work?
So that's a great question. So it's recharged. I mean, when we talk about groundwater, it's recharged through geologic time. So in Alberta, there's interbedded aquifers, and then the biggest aquifer in Alberta is the Pascapoo Formation. So it goes from like south of Calgary all the way up to just kind of north of Drayton Valley. It's huge. It's the biggest aquifer in Alberta, about 400 meters thick, and there's interbedded units within that. So shallow aquifers are recharged from precipitation, from a runoff, but when we talk about deeper, and especially in different all throughout North America, it's recharged through more like 100 to thousands of years. So when we're pumping these wells, this isn't like I said, we're pulling water that's dated, like I said, over 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 years old. So from my point of view, that's more sustainable than pumping a river dry, right? For whatever usage you need. So I think groundwater is an excellent alternative, but I do think, and then as the deeper you drill, I mean, you have higher TDS, you have an increase in salinity as you go deeper, generally speaking. Certain formation or aquifers that you do encounter fresh water, and I guess in Alberta there's a magic number. It's 4,000 milligrams per liter total dissolved solids is the number for saline water, and then fresh water. And then for potable, like for people to consume, anything less than 1,000 milligrams per liter TDS would be, I mean, ideally bottled water is anywhere from 250 to 500.
I see.
So, I mean, that high quality water, groundwater, should be utilized for domestic usage, agriculture, like, livestock, that sort of feedlots, that sort of thing. And then my vision is, I think lower quality groundwater should be used for oil and gas activity, mining, right? Because there's no other viable usage of it.
So you can kind of pick which water you source for industrial projects?
Totally. And so the drilling costs, and that's what's interesting, is shallower wells, the shallower you drill, like the reason most acreages use their shallow wells is because of the first available aquifer, which is like 30 to 50 meters. Those wells are still like $10,000 to $20,000 to drill, but deeper. So the deeper you go, the drilling cost, especially in Alberta, goes up substantially. Like we're talking 10, 15 times due to the, blowout preventer requirements and big crews. You need a bigger rig and that sort of thing. So sure, in a perfect world, we would use low quality saline groundwater for fracs and for industrial usage, but economics come into play, right? It always comes down to, I mean, dollars and cents, right? And if you can, and data. There's more data on shallow bedrock aquifers than there are of deeper saline ones, and that's what you need investment to understand, like basically to understand deeper saline aquifers, and there's very little data. Like there's a few companies have spent the money, like I'd say Ovintiv or Encana, Repsol. Some of these larger companies have spent a ton of money researching and testing saline aquifers, but for the most part, it's mostly shallow, and that's where right now it's a viable business for us. But I do think long term, in future generations, they'll look back and maybe say, what were these guys doing? Right.
Yeah, exactly. That's everyone, you can understand the private interests and why you might want to access the shallow water for industrial projects and all that. But is there enough of that shallow water to use? I don't know. Is it a worry for you that we're using up all the good water for projects?
Well, that's what we do when we test these water wells, right? We test them for sustainable yields.
Huh.
Can you pump? So how long can you pump this sustainable? In Alberta, it's for 20 years. So we do 3-day. They're totally 7-day pumping tests in total. So 3 days of pumping, 3 days of recovery, and we then use that data to project 20 years and say, is that sustainable for it? Could you pump that well for 20 years sustainably? And I think 20 years. We've never pumped a well continuously for 20 years, but
right.
We definitely, collect the proper data to make an educated decision today, right? Was that sustainable? And then the regulators review that, and then and I guess if there's adequate, we're blessed, I would say Canada and Alberta and BC is blessed with abundant water, groundwater and surface water, right? So it's not really. Do I worry about Western Canada for what? Absolutely not. But then I don't. Absolutely not. No, there's adequate recharge. Yeah, absolutely. But other places, I mean, southern U.S., arid places around the world, absolutely. But I also think there will be, I was at one conference in Austin, Texas, about desalination, and the technology. Right. Everybody always says, oh, that's never going to happen. It's too expensive. And they say it's too complicated. And it is complicated to remove salts from water. But with RO membrane technology, reverse osmosis membranes that they're developing, it's like the green technology boom too. People say, oh, solar panels, wind's too expensive.
Yes.
Sure, it is.
Just give it like 10 years.
Yeah. And it's just like anything. And people are brilliant. People are so smart, and they figure out ways to reduce the cost, get it more economic. And I have no doubt in my mind that. So there you go. 96.5% of the world's water is ocean, so saline. Yeah. Will we figure out? And then that remaining 3% is fresh water and groundwater stored in glaciers. Will the human race figure out a way to cost effectively desalinize water? Absolutely. I think so.
That's the thing. I think it's easy for people to kind of villainize people that may want to privatize water, or they're worried about us running out of fresh water, and maybe we will. But when you talk to someone like you who knows a lot about it, you start to realize that there's a lot of nuance to it. Maybe we won't run out of fresh water, and there's maybe some options down the line, and it's not totally black and white.
For sure. And it's very area dependent, right? Right. Like I said, Canada does not have a water problem at all.
Right.
Does there certain places in, like I said, Europe and Asia? Absolutely. Based on what you see in the news. So
even if you did own all the water rights in Canada, it may not be worth anything because there's so much of it anyways.
Seriously, yeah. And the government, like I said, the way it's structured, I don't think you would. I don't think it'll ever get to a point where it's like freehold, right? Where it's distributed amongst landowners. Yes. I don't. It's too late. It's been done this way for the last 100 whatever years.
So going forward, the opportunities for a company like Connate are working with industry and maybe looking towards new technology on trying to figure out ways to get deeper water sources and salinity factors and all that.
Absolutely, yeah. We're currently, like I said, we're playing in the shallow, less than 150 meter kind of potable. So these are shallower wells, but definitely all of our equipment is structured and our know-how to go drill deeper source wells, and that's what we're working with. Though, like I said, it is expensive. So, you do need companies and people to put their money where their mouth is and de-risk these projects.
Do you need much water for nickel mining operations?
Nickel, I'm not specifically. Coal mining we're involved with a bit, right? And diamond mine. I do think there's opportunity in diamond diamond mining,
Yeah.
coal mining, but nickel I'm not super familiar with specifically.
I was reading, it was Battery Day yesterday for Tesla, the annual shareholder thing, and you know, people hate and love Elon Musk, but his
Yes,
comment was that they're looking for nickel for the batteries. It's in short supply, and that, you know, they're willing to fund nickel mines, and it's in huge demand. And I was just curious, maybe that's an opportunity for you guys.
absolutely. Yeah, so precious metals we look at like lithium
Yeah,
chloride.
yeah,
What's
exactly.
interesting, yeah, and there's companies that are, I mean, so this week was Geoconvention 2020 wrapped up today. It was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and it was fully virtual. But regarding precious metals, yeah, like solution mining of produced water, like there's actually high lithium in certain areas of Alberta
Yeah.
in produced water, right? So if the oil and gas industry is handling this water and re-injecting in disposal wells, why not solution miners strip out precious metals like nickel,
Hmm.
lithium, and so forth? So yeah, there is companies that we watch. E3 Metals would be one that comes to mind, a Calgary-based company
Hmm.
that, yeah, so there's definite opportunity for us, especially on like the de-risking of it. So sampling,
Uh-huh.
testing, so adequate yields, like all of our pressure transducers and mapping and all that. So there's a huge opportunity. It's just, that industry isn't it's in its early stages, I would say, in infancy.
I mean, you know, the battery, it's all it comes from batteries, because they'll be, you know, needing batteries for the cars and
Yeah.
phones and everything else. And I just thought maybe that would be something you guys might look towards.
For sure. No, absolutely. I think, like I said, water handling and corporate water management
Yeah.
associated with like I said, mining is definitely on our radar, and we do a little bit of work currently. I said in coal mining, but not. But what's interesting is another thing is I find funny is that the mining industry, like diamonds, for instance, are
Hmm.
extremely dirty process for extraction.
Hmm.
And you know, if you look at open pit mining and of diamond mines, like
Yeah.
they're hideous. And
Yes.
I just find it interesting how certain industries kind of get a pass versus others that just, you know, are very taboo and
Right.
almost villainized, right?
That is
So
interesting.
yeah, and I at the end, my personal opinion is that you know, Tesla and your own, like as far as electrification of vehicles, you're only as clean as the power that you're getting to electrify that vehicle, right?
Hmm.
So I think the funniest Tesla I've seen in downtown was a license plate that said coal PWD, coal powered. So I
Yeah.
mean, the grid is currently coal powered, right? So
Right.
in this city, so until we figure out, I mean, natural gas is a green alternative that
Yeah.
is much cleaner,
Yeah.
and I'm excited to see that.
Hmm. Have you ever read Dune by Frank Herbert?
No, what's I don't read a ton of books.
I
I thought
thought, yeah.
I read like articles. I guess my ADD, attention deficit disorder, doesn't allow me to sit down and read a long 200
Okay.
page book. But anyways, what's it about?
Oh, it's a sci-fi classic, touches on underground water aquifers and the ethics of that, and how the desert planet is, they've got no water basically. And I thought maybe you might have read that story.
So it's science fiction? Is it science
Yeah,
fiction?
it's like the classic sci-fi from the 60s. I think Star Wars is kind of based on Dune. And
Oh,
yeah,
okay. Okay. Yeah.
so
No, not the reader. I'm not the reading crowd.
I just
But
finished it, and there, yeah.
is there a video? Is there an audio book? I would tune
Yeah,
into that.
actually coming out with a new movie. It'll probably be nowhere near as good as the book, but you could. There's a new movie coming out this sometime soon. So,
That's awesome. That's cool.
but yeah, well, that's awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this podcast and explain the water industry a little bit and where you guys
Yeah.
are at.
Or the guys had some, like I said, I had some of your guys' coffee this morning. Loved it. What are your plans on Rose Bros coffee and water usage? What's your take on that?
Well, we thankfully don't have to worry about, you know, the ethics of water usage and all that. We're we're focused on getting on grocery shelves right now. So, but that's definitely you need water to grow coffee, obviously,
Yes.
and so, and a lot of those places in, you know, the southern hemisphere, like you were saying, I don't know if water is in, large supplies.
Hmm.
Like Colombia, Guatemala.
Haven't been down there. I really want to go. I really want to go to Argentina.
Yeah.
I heard it's beautiful down there, and there's wineries and stuff, and I definitely want to check out down there. Um, yeah, I'm
Do you know
not.
what I
I
mean
mean,
though? Like, is there a lot of are there water problems in countries like that? That's something that, ethically
well, I think
should be on our
access to
radar.
clean potable for sure, right? Like as far as um, like you have a lot of microbial issues, right? Like with septic systems and
Yes.
access to clean water. You might have an abundant supply, but I mean, is it clean, right? As far
Hmm.
as leaking septic tanks and contamination from all kinds of different things, right? Gasoline, yeah, like humans, like just any type of human footprint,
Yes.
right? So I think there's definitely, I mean, the only little thing that I can think of, there was a project in Dominican Republic. So one of my goals is to provide, I want to do a project. There was an opportunity we looked at in Dominican Republic to assist and drill a source well for a community where they
Hmm.
are, yeah, but so with regards, I'm all about giving back. And I think that's something that, I mean, I'd like to take our knowledge and partner with a driller where they would provide the drilling materials, but we would provide my time, sampling equipment, testing
Yeah.
equipment, whatever we need to test the source well. And that's something that we got our eyes on is doing, giving back to the community in different places. And we don't actually need to probably go as far as Dominican Republic
Yeah.
to find places that need uh, safe drinking water. And one that's actually not spoken of very much is First Nation
Yeah.
reserves. There's a
Hmm.
huge issue, like I said, on the microbial side of E. coli, total coliforms, like septic issues, right, where people are
Hmm.
not drinking clean water here in Canada.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a big issue. And well, even getting back to coffee, it's like we were saying, it's easy to point the finger at certain industries, but can you imagine how much water the coffee industry uses?
Yeah, yeah, it was huge, but it's for something that, I mean, that's I love my I'm not that's the last thing I'm giving up, right?
Yeah, but
Coffee in the morning.
nobody ever questions it. You know what I mean? Like there's certain industries that get a real black eye, but then you look to agriculture and coffee and stuff like that. There's nobody protesting water usage in the coffee industry.
No, and that's something that, I mean, I don't yeah I don't know how this, I think it's also just marketing, right? Like where are
Yeah.
these marketing dollars getting pushed towards, right? With these agendas, and
Yes.
I think you're right. Diamonds, coffee are not on that agenda.
No. But oil and gas, it's for better or for worse, they get a ton of protest towards that industry.
Oh, huge, huge, yeah. And it's especially, I'd say, in Canada, especially down south, like down in the States. I mean, it's just it's like any other industry down there, and I'd say there's a lot more respect for it. Let's put it that way. And um, like I said, people are directly benefiting from it, and that's maybe something that's going on up here. Is just it's more, lack of a better word, maybe more socialist, right? We're distributing it throughout the whole country.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it's awesome.
Well, thanks. You better tune in.
Thanks.
Yeah, tune into the throne speech. It's already happened, but I guess there'll be another,
Yeah.
something like it's 6:30 coming up here soon.
Yeah,
So
we'll have to log in, check that out now. So thanks, Geoff. Thanks
thanks,
for taking
Trevor.
the time,
I
sitting
really
down,
enjoyed it. That was great.
the ethics of water and the ins and outs of the industry. And
It's perfect. I really enjoyed it.
we'll have to sit down for part two one of these days with an actual coffee.
Let's do it. Let's do it. I got one. This morning was Rose Bros, but this is
Ah,
Nespresso. So,
oh, the
but
lousy, yeah.
that's what I was drinking right now. But absolutely, I would love to.
All right, well, we'll wrap it
Thanks,
up there.
thanks, Trevor. Have a good rest of the week.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate you doing that.
Are we recording still, or we're done? Or,
It's